Professor Velkrin Thos was, in his own thoroughly biased opinion, the finest xenobiologist in the entire Galactic Academic Institute. And why wouldn't he be? He had 17 advanced degrees, 4 cybernetic memory implants, and an ego so massive it required its own gravitational field. Every third cycle Velkrin strutted into lecture hall via 9 like he owned the place. Which technically he did not, but nobody bothered to correct him because, well, he was tenured, and tenure in the Galactic Academic Institute was more permanent than a singularity's event horizon. Students? Velkrin's voice boomed through the amphitheater, his 3 vocal cords harmonizing in what he believed was an inspiring tone. His scales shimmered under the bioluminescent panels, a proud iridescent blue that screamed, "I am better than you, and we both know it." He tapped his data slate with one of his 6 fingers, and a holographic display burst to life behind him. Today we continue our fascinating series on failed evolutionary experiments from Category 9 Deathworlds. The assembled students, a mixture of species from across the cooperative, shifted in their seats, some with excitement, some with dread, most with the resigned acceptance that comes from knowing you cannot drop a required course without losing your scholarship. Velkrin's specialty, you see, was not just xenobiology. Oh no, that would be too simple, too pedestrian. His true passion was categorizing and mocking the absolute disasters of evolution that somehow, against all statistical probability, managed to survive on the most hostile planets in known space. He kept specimens, dozens of them, hundreds if you counted the frozen samples in sub-level storage unit 42 which his research assistant kept begging him not to open. Containment protocols, she would whine. Safety regulations. Boring stuff. His office was a testament to his life's work. Preserved creatures floating in suspension tanks. Crystallized spore samples from worlds where the atmosphere could melt starship hulls. A rather alarming collection of what he called adorably lethal organisms that had evolved on planets with gravity 3 times galactic standard. He loved showing them off at faculty mixers. Nothing said I am intellectually superior quite like a jar containing a creature that could, theoretically, eat through reinforced titanium if it ever woke up. Then came cycle 47 of the academic year. The day everything changed. The day the humans arrived. 3 of them, to be precise. Exchange students from Earth, that backwater Class 9 death world in the Sol system, recently admitted to the cooperative after they had figured out faster-than-light travel and this still baffled the Galactic Transit Authority, strapping themselves to barely controlled explosions and hoping for the best. Typical death world logic. If it can kill you, ride it into space. Velkrin had watched their orientation footage with barely concealed glee. Humans. Bipedal. Single heart. No exoskeleton. No natural armor plating. No venom sacs. No redundant organ systems. They were not even particularly fast or strong compared to other Deathworld species. They were, in his professional opinion, a cosmic joke, a punchline searching for a setup. And now, 3 of them were attending his university, attending his lectures, sitting right there in the middle rows with their weird forward-facing eyes and their strangely smooth skin and their complete lack of sensory antennae. One of them, a male specimen named Marcus Webb, according to the roster, even had the audacity to look bored during Velkrin's brilliant lecture on Krillian acid spitters. Bored, during a lecture that had won Velkrin the prestigious Xanthrop Prize for Xenobiological Excellence. That was it. That was the moment Velkrin decided his next lecture series would focus entirely on humans. He would dissect their laughable biology. He would expose their fragilely improbable existence. He would demonstrate with scientific precision and perhaps a touch of theatrical flair exactly why Earth's dominant species should have gone extinct approximately 4 million times by now. He began preparations immediately. Ordered specimens from Earth through, admittedly, some questionable black market biodealers. Bacteria samples, plant matter, a few insects, nothing dangerous, he assured himself. Just enough to prove his point. Just enough to show these Deathworlders that their biology was nothing special. Just enough to cement his legacy as the professor who had definitively proven that humans were evolution's participation trophy. Velkrin smiled, his teeth glinting in the lab's sterile light. This was going to be his masterpiece. Spoiler alert, it was not. Biolab 7 was not Velkrin's usual venue. Lecture Hall Phi 9 was comfortable, familiar, safe. But Biolab 7 had something the lecture hall did not. Level 3 containment fields, chemical fume extractors, and enough emergency override switches to make a paranoid safety inspector weep with joy. Velcrin had gone all out. The holographic displays were triple resolution. The specimen containers were arranged in ascending order of what he called evolutionary embarrassment. The lighting was dramatically dimmed, with spotlights positioned to illuminate each display at precisely the right moment. He had even commissioned a musical sting for the big reveals. This was not just a lecture. This was theater. This was art. This was going to be legendary. The students filed in. 73 beings from 42 different species. Velcrin spotted the 3 humans immediately. Hard to miss them really, with their bizarrely symmetrical faces and their apparent need to wear excessive amounts of clothing despite the temperature-controlled environment. Marcus Webb sat in the 3rd row, flanked by his 2 companions, a female named Rita Torres, and another male called Jack Chin. All 3 wore expressions of polite interest, that same infuriating boredom. Not for long, Velcrin thought smugly. "Welcome, welcome." Velcrin spread his arms wide, his lab coat flaring behind him like a cape. Several students flinched. "Good. Set the tone early. Today we examine one of the galaxy's most perplexing mysteries. How, and I cannot stress this enough, how did humans survive long enough to achieve spaceflight?" A ripple of laughter ran through the assembled students. The Cathari delegation clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Vreen twins puffed their cheek sacs appreciatively. Even stoic Grelnak, who never laughed at anything, allowed himself a slight whistle of approval. The humans did not react. Marcus just crossed his arms. Interesting. Velcrin tapped his data slate, and the first hologram materialized. A rotating anatomical diagram of a human skeleton. Behold, the internal structure of Homo sapiens. Note, if you will, the completely inadequate framework supporting their entire body mass. 2 legs. 2. Not 4. Not 6. Not even a stabilizing tail. Just 2 spindly appendages balanced on tiny platforms they call feet. He zoomed in on a human foot. 300 bones in the entire body, and 26 of them, nearly 9%, are wasted in these ridiculous appendages. Evolution, ladies and gentlemen and other distinguished beings, clearly had a sense of humor when it designed this species. More laughter. A Bloraxian in the front row actually slapped his desk in delight. But wait, it gets worse. Velcrin was warming up now, pacing back and forth like a performer. Single heart. 1. A Cathari has 3. A Vreen has 5 distributed throughout their body. Humans put all their circulatory trust in one fist-sized muscle that, if damaged, immediately leads to catastrophic system failure. What kind of evolutionary strategy is that? He pulled up another diagram. No exoskeleton, no chitinous plating, no subdermal armor of any kind. Their largest organ is skin. Skin, a thin, easily punctured membrane that serves primarily to keep their internal fluids from leaking out. It tears if you scratch it too hard. A Kale student raised one claw-tipped limb. "Professor, surely they have some defensive adaptations." "Oh, they do, they do!" Velcrin could barely contain his glee. "They have hair. Thin protein strands that provide approximately 0 protection from anything. They also sweat. They leak fluids when they get warm. It is their primary cooling mechanism. They are essentially self-basting." The room erupted. Students were chittering, whistling, and honking in amusement. This was going perfectly. Velcrin glanced at Marcus. The human's expression had not changed. Still calm, still quiet, almost expectant, as if waiting for something. But enough theory. Velcrin gestured dramatically toward his specimen containers. "Let me show you the kind of organisms humans share their planet with. The competition, the threats, the supposedly dangerous lifeforms from Earth that humans claim are deadly." He approached the first container, a sealed cylinder containing a petri dish. "This, students, is human bacterias. Specifically a strain called Bacillus subtilis, harmless by galactic standards, found in Earth's soil. Humans encounter billions of these every single day, and yet their immune systems treat this like a credible threat. Can you believe it?" Velcrin's fingers hovered over the containment release. His 12 years of training whispered warnings in the back of his mind. Protocol said check the seals. Protocol said verify atmosphere compatibility. Protocol said maybe do not open random Earth specimens in front of 73 students just to prove a point. But Velcrin's ego was louder than protocol. He pressed the release. The container hissed open. Marcus Webb uncrossed his arms and leaned forward slightly. And that, as they say, was when things started getting interesting. The bacteria sample sat innocently in its petri dish, a thin film of beige culture that looked about as threatening as a nap on a sunny afternoon. Velkrin held it up to the light, letting the spotlights catch the dish at dramatic angles. "This," he announced with maximum condescension, "is what humans fear. Microorganisms so simple, so primitive, that they have existed virtually unchanged for billions of years. And yet Earth's dominant species requires complex chemical interventions just to survive exposure to them. Antibiotics, they call them. Imagine being so fragile you need medicine just to handle dirt." He placed the dish on the analysis platform. The holographic scanner hummed to life, projecting a magnified view of the bacteria colony above the lab. Tiny rod-shaped organisms wriggling in their nutrient gel, completely oblivious to the mockery happening around them. Note the simple cellular structure, no complex organelles, no sophisticated defense mechanisms, just basic reproduction and metabolic function. A first-year biology student could engineer something more impressive in their sleep. That was when the environmental sensors started beeping. Softly at first, just a minor fluctuation in atmospheric composition. Velkrin glanced at the readout and frowned. The bacteria were producing waste gases at a slightly elevated rate. Odd, but not alarming. Probably just a reaction to the lab's specific atmospheric mixture. 80% nitrogen, 18% oxygen, 2% trace gases. Perfectly normal, perfectly safe. He waved dismissively at the sensors. A minor metabolic response. Nothing to worry about, except the beeping did not stop. It got faster. The bacterial colony on the holographic display was growing, visibly, measurably, in real time. The reproduction rate was accelerating. 1 cell became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 1632. The doubling time was dropping from minutes to seconds. Professor? A nervous Vreen student pointed at the display. Is it supposed to do that? Velkrin's confidence wavered for exactly half a second before his ego shoved it back into place. Of course, bacterial reproduction under optimal conditions. Textbook behavior. Nothing we have not seen before. Except he had not seen it before. Not like this. Galactic standard bacteria were predictable. They followed rules. They reproduced at calculable rates based on environmental factors. They did not just suddenly decide to throw a reproduction party because they felt like it. The petri dish was now visibly cloudy. The beige film had thickened to a murky brown. A faint smell began permeating the lab. Something earthy, organic, weirdly alive in a way that made Velkrin's scales itch. "Professor, the containment field." His research assistant Trill, a competent Bloraxian who actually read safety manuals, jabbed frantically at her console. "The bacterial mass is producing acidic compounds. It is eating through the dish." Sure enough, tiny hairline cracks were spreading across the petri dish. The bacteria, those supposedly simple organisms, were dissolving their own container. Not aggressively. Not violently. Just persistently. Patiently. Like they had all the time in the world, and knew it. Velkrin lunged for the emergency containment switch. A secondary force field snapped into place around the analysis platform, humming with enough energy to contain a small plasma reaction. The bacterial spread stopped at the field boundary. Crisis averted. Probably. See? Velkrin straightened his lab coat, trying to project an authority he no longer entirely felt. Contained. Under control. This merely demonstrates the crude survival mechanisms of Earth organisms. Quantity over quality. Reproduction over sophistication. Several students were edging toward the exits. The Cathari delegation had all extended their secondary defensive spines. Even Grelnak looked concerned, which was saying something because Grelnak's homeworld had predators that hunted by burrowing through solid rock. Marcus Webb was leaning back in his chair now, arms crossed again, one eyebrow slightly raised. If Velkrin did not know better, he would swear the human looked amused. "Moving on." Velkrin's voice went up half an octave. He cleared his throat, forcing it back down. "Let us examine Earth's plant life. Equally primitive. Equally unimpressive." He activated the second specimen container. This one held a small potted plant, something called kudzu, according to his black market supplier. A vine-type organism with broad leaves, completely harmless, used for erosion control on Earth. How dangerous could erosion control possibly be? The container opened. The plant sat there, doing absolutely nothing. Just photosynthesizing quietly like a well-behaved vegetable. Velgren felt his confidence returning. See? Perfectly safe. The bacteria thing was a fluke. An anomaly. This was fine. Earth plants, he continued, operate on one of the most inefficient energy conversion systems in known biology. Photosynthesis, converting light into chemical energy at a paltry efficiency rate. Our own Xanthrope sun feeders achieve 40% conversion. These plants, 6% on a good day. It is embarrassing, really. He adjusted the lighting above the kudzu, increasing the intensity to demonstrate how poorly it would respond. More light, minimal growth increase. Simple, predictable, scientific. Except the kudzu apparently had not read the scientific literature. Within 30 seconds of the increased light exposure, the vine twitched. Not much. Just a slight curl of one tendril. Then another. Then the leaves oriented themselves toward the light source with what could only be described as enthusiasm. Normal phototropic response, Velgren said quickly. Program behavior. Nothing impressive. The vine grew 3 centimeters. In 10 seconds. Velgren blinked. That was not normal. That was not possible. Plant growth rates were measured in days or weeks, not seconds. He checked the readout. The kudzu was not just growing. It was metabolizing at rates that should require animal-level energy expenditure. It was drinking water from its pot like a marathon runner at a hydration station. Another tendril stretched out, then another. The vines were questing toward the light panel like heat-seeking missiles made of chlorophyll and terrible life choices. Professor. Trill's voice had gone very flat, very calm, the kind of calm that usually preceded someone saying, "I quit." The plant is breaching its container perimeter. A vine had indeed slithered over the pot's edge, and was now creeping across the analysis platform. Slowly, inexorably, heading toward the nutrient feed tubes that supplied the lab's hydroponic systems. Oh no. Velgren slammed another containment field into place. The vine stopped, pressing against the energy barrier like a puppy against a window. An aggressive, photosynthesizing puppy that really wanted to access the building's water supply. Also contained, Velgren announced. Sweat was forming on his scales. He did not know his species could sweat. Apparently, stress revealed all kinds of new biological functions. Nothing we cannot handle. Science is about controlled observation, and we are definitely observing in a controlled manner. That was when the insect container started rattling. Just slightly. Just enough to make every student in the room turn and stare at it with the kind of collective dread usually reserved for impending asteroid impacts. Velgren looked at the container. Looked at his class. Looked at Marcus Webb, who was now definitely smiling. Not a big smile. Just a slight upward curve at the corners of his mouth. The smile of someone who knew exactly how this story ended and was patiently waiting for everyone else to catch up. The rattling got louder. Something inside the container was waking up. Something with legs. Probably too many legs. The kind of number of legs that made mathematicians uncomfortable. Velgren's hand hovered over the third container's controls. His survival instincts, buried under years of academic arrogance, were screaming at him to stop. To call it a day, evacuate the lab, and maybe take up a nice safe career in theoretical mathematics where nothing could explode, grow, or develop a sudden interest in eating through containment fields. But his ego, that magnificent bastard, had other plans. He opened the third container. The one labeled, Earth Insects, Assorted Things, immediately got weird. The insects did not burst out dramatically. That would have been too simple, too Hollywood. No, they emerged slowly, deliberately, like tiny armored tanks performing a reconnaissance mission. First one, then 3, then a dozen. And cockroaches. Something that looked like a beetle but moved with the confident swagger of an organism that had survived every extinction event Earth could throw at it. Harmless, Velgren insisted, watching the insects spread across the analysis platform. Earth insects are small, easily crushed, utterly lacking in the advanced hive mind capabilities of proper galactic species. These creatures operate on pure instinct. Watch how they scatter randomly without coordination or purpose, except they were not scattering randomly. The ants were forming organized columns, moving with military precision toward the edges of the containment field. The cockroaches were testing the barrier at multiple points, probing for weaknesses like tiny 6-legged engineers, and the beetle, that absolute unit of an insect, was just sitting there, waiting, calculating, possibly judging Velgren's life choices. Professor. Trill was no longer at her console. She was standing on her chair, all four of her arms pointing at different disaster zones simultaneously. The bacterial containment is failing. The kudzu has reached secondary growth phase. And oh, by the 7 moons, something is growing in the ventilation system. Velcrin spun around. Sure enough, the ventilation grate above the bacterial containment field was developing a fuzzy green coating. Mold. Earth mold. How did mold get into a sealed laboratory ventilation system? When did that even happen? The answer, as Marcus Webb could have told him, was immediately. Earth mold did not wait for permission. Earth mold did not respect containment protocols. Earth mold saw an opportunity and took it, spreading spores through air currents with the kind of aggressive efficiency that had allowed it to survive everywhere from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to that weird spot behind your refrigerator you forgot to clean. Activate full atmospheric filtration, Velcrin commanded, jabbing at his console. The lab's air scrubbers kicked into high gear, humming loudly. The mold stopped spreading, for about 5 seconds. Then it adapted, because of course it did. The fuzzy coating thickened, changing color from green to brown to a concerning shade of orange that meant it was probably producing some kind of chemical defense mechanism. The atmospheric sensors started screaming, not beeping, screaming. Multiple alarms competed for attention, creating a symphony of imminent disaster. Carbon dioxide levels rising, oxygen levels fluctuating, unknown organic compounds detected, temperature increasing, humidity spiking. The kudzu chose that exact moment to release pollen. Velcrin did not know it was releasing pollen at first. He just noticed a faint yellow cloud spreading from the plant, drifting through the containment field like it was not even there. Because, and here was the fun part that Velcrin's black market supplier had failed to mention, kudzu pollen was microscopic enough to pass through energy barriers designed to stop matter at the cellular level, not the subcellular level. A Vreen student sneezed. Then another. Then 6 more students were sneezing, coughing, their eyes watering. The Cathari delegation started clicking in distress. Apparently their respiratory filters were not designed for Earth plant allergens. Why would they be? Nothing in the galactic cooperative produced allergens this aggressive. Most civilized plants had the decency to reproduce without inflicting respiratory distress on innocent bystanders. Remain calm. Velcrin's voice cracked. This is a minor atmospheric contamination. Easily resolved. The filtration systems will handle it. Any moment now. Any moment. The filtration systems were in fact not handling it. They were choking on Earth pollen the way a luxury transport chokes on asteroid debris. Warning lights cascaded across every control panel. Red. Amber. That special purple that meant something was so wrong the computer had to invent a new warning color. The insects, meanwhile, had organized a jailbreak. The ants had found a microscopic gap where the containment field interfaced with the platform's power coupling. They were filing through it, single file, carrying bits of the bacterial culture with them. Because why not? If you are escaping, you might as well bring snacks. No. No, no, no. Velcrin lunged for the platform, trying to block the gap with his hands. An ant crawled onto his finger. He shrieked, flailing. The ant held on with the grip strength of an organism whose species had been perfecting the art of not letting go for 100 million years. It bit him. It was barely a pinprick. It was also the most offended Velcrin had ever been in his entire academic career. The cockroaches had found the ventilation intake. Oh, they had found it. They were climbing into it with disturbing enthusiasm, disappearing into the ductwork. Going places, seeing sights. Probably heading straight for the central air processing unit where they could really spread out and get comfortable. Seal the ventilation. Velcrin screamed. Emergency lockdown. Everything. Seal. Everything. Trill slammed the emergency lockdown button. Blast doors dropped over the main exits. The ventilation system shut down with a mechanical groan. The lights flickered. And in the sudden silence, broken only by the ambient hum of failing equipment and student panic, everyone heard it. A creaking sound. Coming from the kudzu's containment field, the vine had grown, substantially. It was now as thick as Velcrin's wrist, coiled like a spring, pressing against the energy barrier with increasing force. The field was holding. Barely. The power reading was dropping. 1% per second. 94%. 93. 92. How is it doing that? Velcrin whispered. Energy fields do not fail from plant pressure. That is not how physics works, Professor. Marcus Webb's voice cut through the chaos. Calm, clear, completely unsurprised. You might want to step away from the specimens. Velcrin spun on him. This is your planet's fault. Your biology is defective, broken. None of this should be possible. Marcus stood up slowly, holding his hands out in a placating gesture. Rita and Jack were already moving toward the sealed exits, along with about 40 other students who had decided that academic credit was not worth whatever was about to happen. Sir, with respect, Earth organisms are not broken. They are optimized. For Earth, which is a Class 9 death world, where everything is actively trying to kill everything else at all times. Adaptation is not a feature, it is a requirement. Nonsense. I have studied your planet's biology extensively. I know more about Earth than you do. You studied it from books, from safety, from places where nothing was trying to eat you. Marcus pointed at the bacterial containment, where the culture had now completely dissolved its dish and was forming a biofilm over every surface it could reach. That bacteria? It evolved on a planet where the environment changes constantly. Temperature swings, pH variations, chemical exposures. It learned to adapt or die, and it chose adapt. The kudzu's containment field hit 50%. The vine pulsed, growing another 10 centimeters in a burst of cellular expansion that should have required hours, not seconds. The plants, Marcus continued, backing toward the exit. They compete with thousands of other species for light, water, and nutrients. Kudzu specifically can grow a foot per day in ideal conditions. You just gave it ideal conditions. Concentrated light, unlimited nutrients, no competition. You basically gave it plant steroids and asked it politely to behave. 40%. 35. The vine was as thick as Velcrin's thigh now. It had developed thorns. Large thorns. When did it develop thorns? Kudzu did not have thorns. Velcrin checked his data slate frantically. Oh. Some varieties did have thorns. His supplier had sent him the aggressive variety. Wonderful. Just wonderful. And the insects? Marcus was at the door now, along with most of the other students who had correctly assessed that surviving the lecture was more important than getting good notes. Those things have survived ice ages, meteor impacts, and every pesticide humanity could invent. A containment field is just a challenge. They love challenges. This is absurd. Velcrin shrieked. 30%. 25. I am a tenured professor. I have 17 degrees. I know what I am doing. Yeah, Marcus said, hitting the emergency door override. The blast door cracked open just enough for students to squeeze through. That is what they all say right before the lab explodes. Explodes? Nothing is going to explode. This is a biology lab, not a chemistry facility. There are no explosive materials here. Trill grabbed her emergency kit and sprinted for the door. Professor, the kudzu is producing volatile organic compounds. The bacteria are producing methane. The mold is producing O-stars. I do not even know what that is, but it is flammable. 20%. 15. The vine was pressing against the field with enough force to make the air crackle. The beetle, that patient, judgmental beetle, finally moved. It spread its wings, which were apparently hidden under its carapace this whole time, and flew directly at the weakest point in the containment field. 10%. 5. The beetle hit the barrier. The field collapsed. The vine exploded outward. Not with violence. With enthusiasm. With joy. With the sheer exuberance of a plant that had been trapped in a pot for weeks and finally got the chance to really stretch. Velcrin dove behind his console. The vine shot past him, wrapping around light fixtures, support beams, equipment racks. The insects scattered in every direction. The mold released a cloud of spores that made the air shimmer. And somewhere, deep in the lab's environmental systems, multiple organic compounds mixed in ways that chemistry textbooks specifically warned against. Marcus Webb was the last one out. He paused at the door, looking back at Velcrin's terrified face peeking over the console. Sir, you should really evacuate. I can fix this. I just need to recalibrate the containment fields, adjust the atmospheric balance, implement secondary protocols. Or, Marcus suggested, you could run. The temperature alarm hit critical. The methane detector went solid red, and the bacterial biofilm reached the main power conduit, where it began happily consuming the insulation because why not? Insulation was just more food. Everything was food if he were optimistic enough. Velcrin looked at his beautiful lab. His equipment, his specimens, his carefully prepared lecture that was supposed to prove human inferiority. Then he looked at the rapidly spreading vine that was now thick enough to use as a bridge, the insects claiming territory like tiny conquistadors, and the mold that had somehow turned purple and smelled like burning rubber. He ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his entire life, his lab coat flapping behind him, his dignity left somewhere near the analysis platform. He ran through the door, down the corridor, past fleeing students and confused faculty members, past safety officers mobilizing with containment equipment they definitely did not have protocols for. Behind him, Biolab 7 began making noises, ominous noises. The kind of groaning, creaking, hissing sounds that buildings make right before they violently object to their current structural status. Velcrin kept running. Marcus Webb jogged beside him, infuriatingly calm. "Told you so," the human said. "Shut up," Velcrin panted. And then, with perfect comedic timing, Biolab 7 exploded. Exploded was perhaps too strong a word. Biolab 7 did not detonate like a bomb or rupture like a failing reactor. What it did do, and this was somehow worse, was violently reorganize its interior into its exterior through every available opening. Windows blew outward in showers of transparent aluminum. Doors burst from their frames. Ventilation grates shot into the hallway like shrapnel made of disappointment and poor life choices. And the smell. Oh, the smell. Burnt plastic mixed with overripe compost, underlaid with something chemical and vaguely fruit-scented that should not, under any reasonable circumstances, exist in nature. It was the olfactory equivalent of a scream. The blast wave knocked Velcrin forward onto his face. His scales scraped against the corridor floor. His data slate skittered away, immediately trampled by fleeing students who had correctly decided that property damage was preferable to whatever was happening behind them. He rolled onto his back just in time to see a tsunami of biological matter pour through the lab's destroyed entrance. Kudzu. So much kudzu. The vine had apparently spent its last moments of containment preparing for this exact scenario, because it emerged from the lab like a green tentacled monster from a budget horror film. It writhed across the ceiling, wrapped around support pillars, and immediately began questing toward the nearest light sources with single-minded determination. The mold came next, a rolling cloud of spores in 12 different colors, most of which Velcrin was fairly certain were not naturally occurring. Purple, orange, a teal that seemed to glow faintly. Bioluminescent mold. Earth had bioluminescent mold. Why? For what possible evolutionary purpose? Then came the foam. Because apparently, when you mixed Earth bacteria with galactic standard cleaning solutions, kudzu metabolic waste, mold excretions, and the superheated coolant from a ruptured environmental processor, you got foam. Thick, sticky, expanding foam that smelled like a combination of fresh bread and electrical fires. It poured down the corridor in a slow-motion avalanche of absurdity. Velcrin scrambled to his feet, tried to run, made it approximately 4 steps before the foam reached him. It was not fast, but it was inexorable. It caught his feet, his legs pulling him down like quicksand made of soap bubbles and regret. He flailed, arms windmilling, dignity completely abandoned. "Help! Somebody help! I am a tenured professor. This should not be happening to me." Marcus Webb, standing safely beyond the foam's reach, pulled out his communication device. Not to call for help. To record video. Because of course he did. "This is going to get so many views on the galactic network," he muttered. The emergency response teams arrived within 90 seconds. Credit where credit was due, the Galactic Academic Institute maintained excellent emergency protocols. A full hazmat squad materialized from somewhere, wearing sealed suits rated for Class 7 biological contamination. They took one look at the scene, consulted their data slates, looked at the scene again, and collectively decided to call for backup. "What is the contamination type?" the squad leader, a methodical Cathari named Syl, asked through his suit's external speakers. "Earth organisms," Trill offered helpfully. She had made it safely to the intersection, and was watching from behind a corner. "Multiple species. All of them angry." "Earth?" Syl's mandibles clicked in confusion. "A Class 9 world? I thought those were supposed to be primitive." "Yeah," Marcus said, still recording. "We get that a lot." More response teams arrived. Containment specialists, atmospheric technicians, a structural engineer who took one look at the kudzu wrapped around load-bearing pillars, and immediately started filling out evacuation orders. 3 university administrators appeared, saw Velcrin covered head to toe in multicolored foam, saw the biological disaster zone that used to be a functional laboratory, and immediately began calculating how much this was going to cost. A lot. It was going to cost a lot. Velcrin finally managed to drag himself out of the foam. He looked like a rejected mascot for a cleaning product. Globs of purple mold clung to his scales. Kudzu vines had wrapped around his left arm and were already taking root in his lab coat's fabric. An ant colony had apparently decided his right pocket was prime real estate, and had moved in with their bacterial snacks. And the foam, that cursed foam, was hardening into a crust that made him look like a very unfortunate statue. Professor Velcrin Thoss? Seal approached cautiously, as one might approach a live explosive. Are you injured? My pride, Velcrin croaked. My pride is injured. Also, I think something is biting me. Multiple somethings. We will get you to medical immediately. But first I need to know, what level containment breach are we dealing with here? Velcrin looked at the devastation. The kudzu had reached the main corridor intersection and was branching into 3 different hallways. The mold cloud had dissipated but left colorful stains on every surface. The insects were, well, insecting, doing insect things, probably establishing colonies in places that would make the maintenance staff weep. And somewhere in the wreckage, the bacteria were still happily metabolizing whatever they could reach. All of them, Velcrin whispered. We are dealing with all the levels. A news drone appeared, hovering at a safe distance. Then another. Then 6 more. Because bad news traveled fast, but humiliating news traveled at faster than light speeds. Within minutes, every major galactic news network had footage of Professor Velcrin Thoss, renowned xenobiologist, decorated academic, 17-degree holding expert on Deathworld biology, standing in a corridor looking like he had lost a fight with a cleaning supplies warehouse. His communicator, miraculously still functional in his coat pocket, began buzzing. Messages. Hundreds of them. Colleagues asking if he was all right. Students asking if class was canceled. His department head asking if he could explain in writing with full documentation what exactly had happened. The university's legal department asking him to please stop talking to the news drones. And one message from Marcus Webb. Just 6 words. Told you Earth biology was impressive. Velcrin wanted to cry. Or scream. Or possibly both simultaneously. Instead, he just stood there dripping foam, covered in Earth organisms, watching the hazmat teams try to contain the kudzu with tools designed for predictable, rule-following galactic flora. The vine dodged their containment fields. It actually dodged, like it was playing a game. Sir? A young medical technician approached with a bioscanner. We need to make sure you were not exposed to anything toxic. Everything. Velcrin said flatly. I was exposed to everything. Just scan me. Get it over with. The scanner beeped again. Made a confused chirping sound. The technician frowned at the readout. Sir, this says you have 17 different bacterial colonies on your integument, 4 types of fungal spores in your respiratory system, and something is laying eggs in your pocket. The ants, Velcrin said. Because at this point, why not? Why not have ants laying eggs in his pocket? This day could not possibly get worse. They are laying eggs. The medical technician backed away slowly. We are going to need a specialist. Several specialists. Also, we might need to burn your clothes. Burn them. Velcrin agreed. Burn everything. Burn my degrees while you are at it. Burn my reputation. It is all gone anyway. In the distance behind the growing crowd of onlookers and emergency personnel, Velcrin saw him. Marcus Webb. Still recording. Still calm. Still wearing that small, knowing smile. The human gave him a little wave. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just acknowledgement. A simple gesture that said, welcome to understanding Deathworlds. Population U. Nat. Velcrin did not wave back. He just stood there, a monument to hubris, covered in the consequences of underestimating Earth. Around him, the containment teams worked frantically to stop the spread of organisms that really did not want to be contained. Above him, the mold had formed patterns on the ceiling that almost looked like words. Probably a coincidence. Definitely a coincidence. Mold could not spell. Could it? He squinted. The patterns definitely looked like letters. They spelled adapt or. Velcrin closed his eyes. This was fine. Everything was fine. He was a respected academic. He could recover from this. Somehow. Eventually. In a few decades. Maybe after he changed his name and moved to a different galaxy. His communicator buzzed again. Another message. This time from the university president. My office. Tomorrow. Bring documentation. And for the love of all that is scientific, take a decontamination shower first. Velcrin opened his eyes. Looked at the chaos around him. Looked at his ruined lab. Looked at the news drones capturing every humiliating angle. Looked at the kudzu which had somehow reached a window and was now stretching toward actual sunlight, probably preparing to take over the entire campus. I really, he said to nobody in particular, really should have listened to the safety protocols. An ant bit him again. He did not even flinch. At this point, what was one more indignity? The University Medical Center had seen many things over its 3 centuries of operation. Plasma burns, dimensional displacement sickness, that incident with the Vreen student who tried to ferment his own study snacks and accidentally created a small singularity. But this was new. Velcrin sat on the examination table, wrapped in bandages from neck to waist. Not because the Earth organisms had injured him. Oh no, the organisms themselves had been completely harmless. The injuries came from his frantic escape attempt, running into walls, tripping over equipment, falling face first into a foam pile and panicking so hard he pulled 3 muscles and dislocated a shoulder joint. The human organisms had not hurt him. His own terror, the irony was not lost on him, or anyone else. The medical staff kept finding excuses to walk past his room pretending they were not absolutely dying to see the professor who had lost a fight with dirt-dwelling bacteria. A knock on the door. Velcrin considered pretending to be asleep. Considered it seriously. But his pride, that battered, bruised, thoroughly humiliated pride, would not let him hide. Come in, he muttered. Marcus Webb entered, carrying 2 containers of something steaming. He set one on the table beside Velcrin. Brought you soup. Hospital food is apparently terrible across all known species. Velcrin stared at the soup suspiciously. Is it from Earth? No, sir. It is calcary mineral broth. Perfectly safe. Marcus pulled up a chair, sitting backward on it in that strange human way. How are you feeling? Like I was attacked by my own stupidity. That is fair. Marcus sipped his own soup, apparently content with the silence. Velcrin hated him for being so calm, so reasonable, so completely correct about everything. You tried to warn me, Velcrin finally admitted. The words tasted worse than any Earth organism could possibly taste. I did. But honestly, sir, you would not have believed me anyway. Some lessons you have to learn practically, painfully, preferably with multiple cameras recording. Velcrin groaned. The footage. How bad is it? It has 47 million views across the galactic network. Someone made it into a musical. There are memes. So many memes. Marcus pulled out his data slate, scrolling through images. Velcrin's foam-covered face superimposed over various humiliating scenarios. His shrieking expression auto-tuned into a song. A dramatic reenactment using animated figures that somehow made it look even worse. My career is over. Maybe the old one, Marcus said, surprisingly gentle. But you could start a new one. The professor who learned to respect Deathworlds. The guy who actually understands why Earth biology is the way it is. You went viral for the wrong reasons. Sure, but people are listening now. They want to know why this happened. Velcrin considered this. His data slate returned to him after decontamination sat on the bedside table. 17 messages from academic journals requesting his analysis of the incident. 43 interview requests. An offer to write a book titled What Not to Do. A Survivor's Guide to Earth Organisms. Even his department head had grudgingly admitted that, despite the catastrophic property damage, this was the most attention the xenobiology program had received in decades. Earth organisms are not primitive, Velcrin said slowly, testing the words. They are optimized for survival in extreme variability. They adapt because they must. They persist because quitting is not encoded in their biology. They succeed because they are too stubborn to fail. Now you are getting it. Marcus smiled. That same small smile from the corridor. We come from a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it. The stuff that survived, it earned that survival, including you, Velcrin agreed. He looked at his bandaged arms, at the medical readouts showing 0 actual damage from Earth biology, at the humiliating footage looping on the news feeds. I am going to rewrite my entire curriculum, properly this time, with actual respect for Deathworld adaptations. And safety protocols. So many safety protocols. That sounds wise, sir. And I am never ever opening another specimen container without reading every single warning label, consulting 3 experts, and checking twice. Also wise. And I am going to publicly apologize to you and your classmates for my arrogance and profound stupidity. Marcus raised his eyebrows. That one is optional, but appreciated. Velcrin sighed, a long exhausted sound that came from somewhere deep in his soul. Outside his window he could see the xenobiology building, or rather the xenobiology building covered in kudzu. The containment teams had given up trying to remove it. They were now just preventing it from spreading further. Divine had claimed Biolab 7 and the surrounding 3 floors. The university administration was discussing whether it was cheaper to cut their losses and just rename it the Earth Botany Annex. You know what the worst part is? Velcrin asked. The memes? The memes are bad. But no. The worst part is that I spent 12 years studying Deathworld biology, and I learned more in 45 minutes of catastrophic failure than I did in my entire career. I was so busy being superior that I forgot to be curious. I was so convinced I understood that I stopped actually learning. Marcus stood, collecting the empty soup containers. If it helps, that is a very human mistake. We do it all the time. The difference is whether you stay arrogant or get humble. I am humble now. Extremely humble. Aggressively humble. Velcrin gestured at his bandages. The universe has made certain of that. Then maybe something good came out of this after all. Marcus headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. Oh, and Professor? The ants in your lab coat pocket? They successfully established a colony in the hazmat disposal unit. The facility manager wants to talk to you about that. Velcrin dropped his head into his hands. Of course they did. Why would they not? Earth organisms never quit. Never, Marcus agreed cheerfully. See you in class, Professor. Assuming the university lets you keep teaching. They will, Velcrin said with more confidence than he felt. I am tenured, and more importantly, I am now the galaxy's leading expert on what happens when you disrespect Earth biology. That has to count for something. After Marcus left, Velcrin sat alone with his thoughts and his viral humiliation, and his new understanding of just how little he had actually understood. His data slate buzzed again. Another meme. This one showed his foam-covered face with the caption, "When you talk trash about someone's homeworld and their bacteria hear you." He stared at it. Then, despite everything, despite the humiliation and the bandages and the destroyed lab and the ruined reputation, he laughed. A small laugh at first, then bigger until his sides hurt and the medical monitor started beeping in concern. 'Cause really, what else could he do? He had mocked Earth. Earth had responded. Decisively. Thoroughly. With microorganisms, and vines and insects that absolutely refused to follow proper galactic biological convention. And in doing so, Earth had taught him the most important lesson of his academic career. Never, ever underestimate a Deathworld. They did not earn that classification by accident. They earned it through 4 billion years of trying, failing, adapting, and trying again. They earned it through organisms that looked at extinction and said, not to. They earned it through biology so aggressively optimized for survival that it made galactic standard organisms look like pampered show pets. Earth biology was not primitive. It was battle-tested. It was not simple. It was ruthlessly efficient. It was not weak. It was proven. And he, Professor Velcrin Thoss, 17 degrees and 0 common sense, had learned that the hard way. He opened a new file on his data slate, titled it, A Revised Understanding of Class 9 Biology, an Apology in Academic Form. Then he started writing, humbly, carefully, with extensive citations, proper respect, and absolutely no mockery whatsoever. Somewhere in the hazmat disposal unit, the ant colony thrived. Somewhere in the xenobiology building, the kudzu photosynthesized happily in its new home. Somewhere in the ventilation system, the mold continued doing whatever mysterious things Earth mold does when left unsupervised. And somewhere on Earth, entirely unaware of the chaos their planet's organisms had caused, billions of humans went about their day, coexisting with bacteria and plants and insects that could apparently conquer a galactic academic institute if sufficiently motivated. Velcrin smiled despite himself. Humanity had not even tried to be impressive. They just existed, and somehow, that was the most impressive thing of all. Never underestimate a Deathworld, especially not one that produced organisms too stubborn to know when they should quit. and definitely, absolutely, under no circumstances ever open their specimen containers in front of 73 students while trying to prove a point. That was a lesson worth learning. Even if it cost him a lab, his dignity, and a viral video that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Worth it? Maybe not. But educational? Absolutely. And really, was that not what academic life was all about?